Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Malloy again, and this is lecture number 6 for Unit 3, the Roman Republic. Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to discover how the Greeks ended up influencing the Romans. And that's going to lead us to the following. Hey, we're all a little Roman, yo, too. Yes, both the ancient Greeks and Romans are responsible for much of what we refer to as Western civilization. See, many people believe that some of the most fundamental values and institutions of Western civilization began in what we call the Roman Republic. So fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. After the decline of Greece, after the Greek Empire sort of fell apart, and after Alexander the Great and all that, another empire was just in the process of getting started, Rome. So let's talk a little bit about the origins of Rome. Where did it come from? Where was it located? We're going to get to that. Okay, so legend has it that Rome came into existence around 753 BC by two brothers named Romulus and Remus. These were two twins who were abandoned along the Tiber River. Aww. And then they were raised by a wolf mommy, aka a she-wolf. I'm going to assume that this is totally make-believe, sort of fodder for Disney movies, also known as myth, passed down by generations to explain, natural phenomenon. Do. Phenomena. Do. Phenomena. Oh, that's not really a song, is it? Yes, Mrs. Malloy sings. Yes, badly, but is singing nonetheless. So, anything to get you interested in the lecture.
And I'm saying that to be kind because you will never, ever, ever have a...
All right, so phenomenon. We often use, or the ancient Greeks, and then following them, the Romans, are going to use, myths or stories to sort of explain their natural surroundings. So yeah, legend has it that Romulus and Remus, those two twins, were raised by a she-wolf and helped to found what we now call Rome. Anyway, let's continue. Rome was actually, we know, built by men who most likely chose this place for its strategic location. It was surrounded by hills and for its extremely fertile soil as well, right? So if you're surrounded by hills, offers some natural protection from invaders. And then obviously if you want to have a civilization anywhere, we have learned this throughout the year, you've got to have fertile soil. So, because if we haven't learned anything yet in Mrs. Malloy's class, we have learned that, hey, fertile land equals massive farming equals eventually having a big population you could feed.
Because if you're always worried about where your next meal is coming from, you're not going to be concerning yourselves with things like pottery or other forms of art.
All right, well, the first Romans included Latins, Greeks, and Etruscan people. Ooh, what's that word she just said? Etruscan. Sounds like a hard word, huh? Don't be afraid of it. It's actually spelled Etruscan, and it's pronounced Etruscan, okay? Not Etruscan, but Etruscan. So anyway, it's safe to say that the Greeks and Romans had quite a bit of contact with one another due to the proximity of both areas. So naturally, there was a blending of culture over time due to geography, trade, and conquest. All right, well, let's talk about how the Roman Republic emerged. What eventually became known as the Roman Republic was actually a collection of villages along a city that had over 500 square miles. What does that mean? That's pretty big. Think huge, Rochester, huge. All right, so the Romans hated having kings, and eventually they're going to establish what became known as a republic. This is, of course, a form of government in which power rests with citizens who have the right to vote for their leaders. Okay, so once again, a republic is a form of government in which power rests with citizens who have the right to vote for their leaders. Just like in Greek democracy, women and slaves were left out. Aww. Do we have a republic now? Okay, recite the Pledge of Allegiance to yourself quickly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Yes, that's right. We do have a republic, albeit one that includes a much wider range of the general public.
Liberty
Yay, democracy.
and justice
Woo, woo.
for
This lecture
all.
is just all kinds of fun today, isn't it? Right, so the Roman Republic was made up of different groups of people who were competing for power, kind of like the cliques on Glee you see competing for influence in their school. Anyway, there were the patricians, the wealthy, snooty landowners who held most of the power, and also a group of people called the plebeians, who were the common farmers, artisans, and merchants, etc., who made up most of the population. Whoa, class conflict way back then? Yes, my friend, some things never change. Anyway, for a long time, only the patricians were allowed to be elected into public office by plebeians. And this wasn't making a lot of those plebes happy. So over time, the patricians allowed for the plebeians to form their own assembly of people that they could actually relate to, and they were called tribunes. Tribunes looked out for plebeian rights and helped prevent the patricians from unfair acts, kind of like modern-day unions. Interesting. All right, well, perhaps the greatest victory for the mere plebeians was the creation of a written code of law known as, and this is super duper important, the 12 Tables. We've already learned about other legal codes in early history, including the Code of Hammurabi and the 10 Commandments, remember? Well, the 12 Tables, they were basically 12 stone tablets upon which laws were carved and then hung in the Forum of Rome, which was the political center of the Roman Empire. Think Capitol Hill in D.C., folks. And may I just add that, wow, I love the use of stone tablets in history, how stylish. But most importantly, the 12 Tables signify that the Romans valued the idea that free citizens had a right to protection under the law, or the same protection under the law. And this is so very essential in American democracy and our whole notion that everybody deserves equal protection under the law. Hello, 14th Amendment in our Constitution, yes. So yes, as you might have guessed, just as there are similarities between Athenian democracy and the U.S.'s form of democracy, so too are there similarities between Roman democratic theories and the U.S. as well. Man, sounds like the founding fathers really liked classical civilizations. Yeah, and considering the time period many of our founding fathers lived, which was at the tail end of a period of time in Europe called the Enlightenment, which we'll be studying later in the year, this will all make perfect sense later, I promise. Okay, so early Romans believed that they had a complete balance of powers in their government. They believed they perfectly balanced monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. Our balance of power is just slightly different, of course, but the key thing to remember is that the Romans felt the need to balance power equally between different groups so as to assure that no one group held all the power in society. This is an interesting concept. You know, ancient Rome had two officials, like kings, in power. They were called consuls. They also had a senate made up of aristocrats and later the plebeians, as we've discussed before. And then from time to time, especially in times of crises, Romans would appoint a dictator or a leader with absolute power to make laws for them. Another aspect of Roman society, it's military. Remember the phalanxes of the Greeks and Alexander the Great? Well, the Romans had a pretty kick-butt army as well. Their soldiers were organized into what we called legions, or large military units made up of foot soldiers, infantry, and soldiers on horseback, cavalry. Legions were also divided up into smaller units called centuries, which ironically were made up of only about 80 men. Ba-dum-bum. Anyway, using their powerful army and fierceness in battle, the Romans spread their power by expanding their influence and empire through conquest and trade. All right, so let's talk about how Rome spread its power. So first they conquered all of Italy. Check. Generally speaking, the Romans were pretty lenient to those they conquered, which some believe allowed them to continue their expansion and rule, and then allowed them to govern their empire for as long as they did. The Romans also traded extensively along both sea and land routes across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They fought many wars, including the Punic Wars, in which the Romans were briefly prevented from taking over part of North Africa by this guy named Hannibal. Generally speaking, in history, if your name is Hannibal, not a good thing. Anyway, after the Romans regrouped, they were able to defeat him, and eventually they laid siege to Carthage in North Africa. The Romans weren't so nice to the Carthaginians. Not only did they burn the city to the ground, they put all of its inhabitants, or forced all the inhabitants, into slavery. This was significant because the Punic Wars ensured that the Romans held control over the Western Mediterranean. And eventually, the Romans will get too big for their britches, which is another way of saying that they became too big for their own good. But more on that later. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.